So our reading today is from Ezekiel, chapter 47. I always forget how long Ezekiel is. Chapter 47, verses 1 to 12. In my vision, the man brought me back to the entrance of the temple. There I saw a stream flowing east from beneath the door of the temple and passing to the right of the altar on its south side. The man brought me outside the wall through the north gateway and led me around to the eastern entrance. There I could see the water flowing out through the south side of the east gateway. Measuring as he went, he took me along the stream for 1,750 feet and then led me across. The water was up to my ankles. He measured off another 1,750 feet and led me across again. This time the water was up to my knees. After another 1,750 feet, it was up to my waist. Then he measured another 1,750 feet, and the water was too deep to walk across. It was deep enough to swim in, but too deep to walk through. He asked me, "Have you been watching, Son of Man?" Then he led me back along the riverbank. When I returned, I was surprised by the sight of many trees growing on both sides of the river. Then he said to me, "This river flows east through the desert into the valley of the Dead Sea. The waters of this stream will make the salty waters of the Dead Sea fresh and pure. There will be swarms of living things wherever the water of this river flows. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will become fresh. Life will flourish wherever this water flows. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea. All the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim, the shores will be covered with nets drying in the sun. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea, just as they fill the Mediterranean. But the marshes and swamps will not be purified. They will still be salty. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow along both sides of the river. The leaves of these trees will never turn brown and fail, and there will always be fruit on their branches. There will be a new crop every month, for they are watered by the river flowing from the temple. The fruit will be for food, and the leaves for healing." It's okay? I'm just going to quickly pray for Simon before he speaks.
Yeah, thank you.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the message that you would like us to hear today. Help Simon to share the words you want us to hear. Help us to listen. Help us to understand what you want to say through him. Amen.
Amen. Well, first of all, I want to bring greetings from churches in Romania. A few of us were there last weekend or last week, and greetings from the church in Teliu, a small village about 20 kilometres east from Brașov, and also from the church in Brașov, in the city of Brașov, B1. There's two Baptist churches in Brașov town centre, and this is B1. B1, we wouldn't go to B2. Come on, they're not as important. No, joke. But we went to B1, Brașov Church is the church where Sammy is employed, the minister that we engage with, and he's a sort of an evangelist, and he is helping this church in Teliu and this project in Holbath, where we were. And so I bring greetings from those two churches. And we'll be finding out more about them next Sunday. But it's just a little thought, first of all. Are you good at waiting? Who's good at waiting? No, there's one at the back. I think one, maybe. Yeah, it's sometimes tough to wait, isn't it? It's tough to wait. Well, that was the story at the end of our mission trip. We had to learn to wait. Before 3 p.m. on Tuesday, just gone, we got on the plane, which was nice. And we waited. They checked things a bit more. And we waited. And eventually we went to the runway. Already about half an hour late from when we were meant to be taking off. And we waited on the runway. And then someone said, apparently, that they could smell something. Great, well done. But they panicked and they thought, So we waited a bit more. And then we decided, well, we didn't, but someone decided that there was a technical fault on the plane. So we went back to the stand and we got off. And we went into the waiting area, the lounge, to wait again for a plane. 2 hours later, at 3 minutes before we would have been 3 hours late, I'm not sure if that's significant, but maybe, possibly, we went back onto this plane and waited. At this time, they realized that the technical fault was in the aircon in the plane. So there it is, a full plane, about 36 degrees outside, no air conditioning. And we had to wait. Some people were getting quite angry. Not us. We were very patient and waiting. Cameron was like, but he wasn't getting angry. We were just getting a little bit frustrated because it was hot and we were waiting. And then someone said, I want to get off. Really? And so we had to wait for the stairs to come back to the plane. And we waited, and then the door opened, and this person eventually got off. And then the pilot said, does anyone else want to get off? We were like, what's going on? He said, does anyone else want to get off? Because he said, it's going to get hotter once the engines start, then it will get cooler. But that will be at least 10 minutes after the engines start. So do you want to get off? And various people moved, and some people looked like they were going to get off, but no, they were just wanting to get close to the door because it was a bit cooler in the 36 degrees than it was in the lack of air conditioning in the plane. And so we waited. No one else got off. But then we had to wait because they had to get the man's bag out of the hold who had left. So we waited. And then they had to make sure that this man hadn't left a bag in the cabin. So everyone had to get their hand luggage or point to their hand luggage so that the cabin crew could check that nothing had been left behind. And it's still really hot, like really hot. And so we waited. And then a trickle of air started coming out from the aircon. It was like, it wasn't much at all, but there was this trickle of air. And so we thought, right, this is it. We're gonna go. So the door shut, the stairs went away, and we pushed back so that we could then go forwards to get round to the runway. And we pushed back, and we waited. Probably for about 45 minutes. We waited. And then we moved. Yes. And we moved onto the runway for the second time. We were on the runway, ready to go. And then by this time, the air conditioning was on. It was cool. It was lovely. Still a few angry people, but it was nice. But we had waited. As I say, we'd got on the plane originally at 2:30. This was now about 8 o'clock, I think. And so we were still waiting on the plane. And then the pilot says, we're waiting because there's air traffic controller told us there's some planes at the far end, so we've got to wait for them to go before they give us clearance to travel. But that will just be 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. So we waited 5 or 6 minutes. Then waited another 15. And then pilot came on. The planes have gone. Good. But there's a big, nasty weather cloud at the far end of the runway, at the far end where we're going to take off. So we can't take off. But it might go. We'll wait. Okay? We'll wait. And then so we're waiting. And then they say, no, we've worked out. There's a weather cloud at that end of the runway, but there's clear behind us. So we'll go up the far end of the runway and turn round. Okay. So that's what, then we were waiting. We thought, why aren't we moving? And he said, no, everyone's got to sit down. I can't move the plane until everyone was sat down, because people kept standing up because they were annoyed. And so eventually everyone sat down and we moved up to the far end of the runway. And we turned round a big loop and we turned round and we were like, yes, here we go. And then we waited. And we were like, what's going on? Why aren't we taking off? And we waited. And we waited. And then we heard the pilot say, or we heard various cabin crews say, please sit down, please sit down. And then we heard the pilot say, oh, I've had enough. I'm fed up. And I thought, but pilots aren't going to say that, are they? But anyway, the pilots basically said, I've had enough. I'm fed up. I'm going back home, or I'm going back to the stand. And we were like, really? So we waited a bit more. And then the plane slowly went back to the stand. And we got off the plane and we went in and got our bags and went through passport and then got back into the airport. What do we do? Wait. And eventually we got home. Our wonderful friends, Cornelia and her brother, came and picked us up and took us back to the church where we were staying. And then the following day, we went back to the airport. Yes! Back to the airport for a 4 o'clock flight. It had then been changed to 5:30 and then 5:45. And then eventually we got on the plane about 6 o'clock because we had to wait. We had to wait. At one stage, we had to wait because another cabin crew member had to get here from Luton. And we were like, have they started this journey? What's, you know? But eventually, we got on the plane. And you know I'm a big football fan. Football kicked off at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. We eventually took off at 5 to 5 English time. I wasn't happy. So that was 5 to 7 Romanian time. And we got home. It was, in the end, it was only a 27.5-hour delay, which wasn't too bad, but it was a lot of waiting. As we close the first half of the Bible, the scriptures, we're going through the story that makes sense of life. The story of how, we can live, looking at the Bible. We get to the end of the Old Testament, and Israel enters a 400-year wait. Not just 27 hours, but 400 years. And if we want to understand why that wait felt so agonizing, we have to look, at the shape of the story they were living in. We've thought about stories many a time. And we can see that in every great story, can't we? Whether that's Rapunzel or Tangled or James Bond or Harry Potter. It follows a particular rhythm. There's a scene. The scene is set. There's a crisis. There's a turning point. The arrival of a hero, the arrival of the prince, the arrival of whoever it is. And then there's a resolution. J.R. Tolkien said, this is the story of a larger kind, the overarching biblical narrative that is written on every human heart. So we were set the scene in Genesis. Many months ago, we started this series looking at Genesis, and we set the scene. The cast was introduced, the type of God who creates and loves and cares. People who were made in God's image, who are designed to relate to God, but who enter into this crisis period when they allow themselves to be tempted by another character, the evil one, as they were tempted. And so the snake in the grass brought crisis into the story. Adam and Eve rebelled against their maker and were expelled. And the story is continued east of Eden ever since in a state of exile, not in the original home. So now we need a hero figure to defeat evil and bring us home. The Israelites were always looking for this hero figure. Was it going to be Noah? And the ark seemed promising. He seemed promising hero, but that ended in a sort of drunken chaos, really. And then God called Abraham and promised that through his descendants, all people would be blessed. And sure enough, Israel emerged, but soon found themselves enslaved in Egypt. And the rescue team now needed to be rescued. So God stepped in through the Exodus. Moses brought them out of Egypt and Joshua led them into the promised land. But then it was hardly happy ever after with Judges and Kings, or the period of Judges and the period of Kings that were good and all too often very bad. Even King David, the closest approximation to a hero, a prince hero in the Old Testament, when, had that moment of adultery and murder. There was still this crisis. But God never gave up on Israel. As the prophets foretold, after 70 years of captivity in Babylon, the exiles were allowed to return home, as Paul was talking about last week, and rebuild. Alongside Nehemiah and the physical reconstruction work, God also called Ezra, who initiated a spiritual detox program. So tried to get them back spiritually as well as physically. Ezra led the people in a ceremony of rededication, taught the law of Moses, and celebrated the Passover festival for the first time in a long time. So by the end of the Old Testament, the people were back in their homeland. They were back in Jerusalem. The temple was built. But it still felt that like they were exiles in their own home. They were still longing for a different country, a far-off country. Nehemiah chapter 9 finishes, "See, we are slaves today in great distress." The people recognized, yes, they were not in that physical exile, but they were still exile. And they were still thinking, yeah, this temple, it's an empty temple. It doesn't have the glory of God. There's all these promises that have been unfulfilled. Promises of a Messiah and a future. And the big question, where is the prince who will bring true shalom? We too are perhaps living in a place that feels, well, it's the right place to live. Earth was always intended to be our home, but clearly all is not well. We experience evil and suffering and death as reminders that we too are exiles in our own home, strangers in our own skin. Yeah, no matter where we dwell on this beautiful planet, we experience the desire for a far-off country. It's the deep longing of those who were made for one reality, Eden, but are experiencing the opposite, exile. In Israel's case, their post-exile disappointment was exacerbated by the grandeur of the promises they had received. Ezekiel had seen these marvelous visions, these dramatic visions that totally eclipsed their current reality. So let's think about it. The vision that Ezekiel has been describing in some of the chapters in sort of before chapter 47 about the size of this temple. It's a massive temple. You know, he's speaking still from in exile, so just before they all came home. But the old temple is ruined. God shows him this massive, almost impossible sized temple, much bigger than one that's ever been built. And he sees water trickling from its threshold. Water is just trickling from it, living water from God's presence. Years later, when the exiles returned to build a physical temple, it's just an empty shell. The glory didn't return. The river wasn't flowing. They were left waiting, hoping. Israel was pregnant with a prophecy she couldn't deliver. Isn't it good, though, that for us, we might be in this period of waiting, but we're living after the Prince came. And so this temple, with this flowing river, is not just something that was promised. It's something that was promised and can now be experienced. Even whilst we're waiting, we get to experience this great temple. The man with the measuring line takes Ezekiel on a long journey, regularly taking out these 1,000 cubits, approximately 1,750 feet, or whatever it might be, you know, how many meters that is. But he takes him out through the temple and down away from the temple where this river is flowing. Yeah, this river is flowing. It's, first of all, it's ankle deep. It's safe. It's manageable. You can paddle in it. That's nice. It's refreshing. It's what we might do this afternoon. It's knee deep. Oh, that's a bit more dangerous, isn't it? Because you might get your shorts wet or your dress wet or whatever it is. But it's a bit more that knee deep. You start to feel the flow of the river. Waist deep. Well, that's a bit more risky, isn't it? Because, well, you could be knocked off your feet. There could be a wave, or there could be something that gets you totally wet. And then where you can't put your feet down, where you can't be fully in control. You can try and swim, but you also have to trust the water to carry you. And where will the water lead you? Obviously, the Israelites were in this waiting room, waiting for God to come, waiting for this temple to be made real. For 400 years between the Testaments, Israel sat in this waiting room, oppressed by Greeks and Romans. They tried to create their own heroes. Yeah, there were people who came, there were revolts they did, there was political compromise. They tried all sorts of things to make something special. But it always ended in heartache. They were waiting with a hope of something coming at some time in the future. A bit like when we sat on that runway and we looked out that window and hoped that one day, 1 hour, we'll take off. But when we're in the waiting room, perhaps waiting for something, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for healing, waiting for a child, waiting for a career breakthrough, waiting for someone to come to know Jesus. We're not waiting as people without hope. We're not waiting with people without the Prince. We know our Prince has come. So let's not be tempted by alternative Prince Charmings. Let's not be tempted by something that offers instant gratification that isn't the true Prince, the one who gives us everything and knows what is best for us. You know, so many times, don't we? We hear the cry of people, I wish I had waited. I wish I had waited. Because God will come. God invites us not to force a shallow solution, but to swim in the depths of his sovereignty. Not trying to control the future, but allowing his leading, his sovereignty to fill our waiting with his peace. The next bit of the vision that Ezekiel has is also just so wonderful. The destination of the river. It flows down into the Arabah, the Jordan Valley, and empties into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. It's so hypersaline that no fish can survive. A literal geographic monument to barrenness and death. Wherever the river flows, everything will live. When the temple water hits the Dead Sea, the salty water is healed and becomes fresh. Fishermen stand on its banks. The trees on both sides of the river grow. Their leaves do not wither. The fruit does not fall because the water flows from their sanctuary. Their fruit is for food and their leaves for healing. Is there something that you've given up on? Is there something that you think, that's just too far gone? Something that you've thought, no, there's no way that can change. People knew that about the Dead Sea. That's a place of death and nothing. But when God's presence flows into it, there is life. There is hope. There's something that you've given up on. Trust in God. Trust in him that he is the one who is able to bring life to what is dead. To bring hope where there is no hope. The restoration of Shalom, the promise of a future kingdom. God can bring his peace and life into any situation. For the prophecy of Ezekiel is true in Jesus. The prophecy of Ezekiel is true because of God's Spirit. And so the Prince arrives. The turning point, after 400 years of waiting, the answer to Ezekiel's vision, Isaiah's prophecy. There is only one Prince who can answer our human cry for peace. Long before Jesus came, Isaiah said in chapter 9, familiar words that we said 6 months ago. And it's now closer to, no, I won't say it. For us, a child is born. To us, a son is given. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The Prince arrives. In John chapter 7, Jesus stands up and says, or shouts out, "Come to me and drink." He's saying, I am the temple. I am the temple. I am the one who the river of life flows from. Come to me and there will be life. What is dead will be changed because it's the river of life. Come to Jesus and drink the living water that he gives. The river of life doesn't flow from a temple. It flows from the pierced side of Jesus. The waiting room is open. Jesus Christ is the long-awaited Prince who fulfills Israel's plotline and provides the turning point in our human story. The shalom he brings is much more than just a ceasefire. And even in the storms of life, there is a harbor for the soul. Even when the bottom falls out, the peace of God can guard your heart. Yeah, come to me. Come to me and drink. Experience the living water. I'm sure, like me, you've known many people who are aware of the business failing. I've not lost my peace. I'm trusting in God. Yeah, someone facing, even last week as we were in Brashoff Church, woman stands up and says, yes, I have this cancer, but God is with me. God is using this for his glory. I have his peace. God's peace can bring peace to any situation. So let's conclude. I don't know if the musicians want to come back. That would be great. Just 3 challenges, just very simple challenges that I was thinking that I want to challenge myself with. Do we want to be people who step out of the shallows? Yeah, where are you trying to control the narrative? Where are you trying to control the narrative or take shortcuts rather than waiting on God? Are you going to rely on your wisdom, your strength, your status, your decisions? Or are you going to say to God, I give this to you. I give this to you. I relinquish control. I give this to you. Are you going to bring that thing that is dead? The Dead Sea. What is it that you're thinking of that is dead? Whatever, that where life feels barren, stagnant. Bring your unfulfilled promises, your disappointments. Bring them to the Prince of Peace today. Yeah, so give up control. Bring your disappointments, your bitterness, And what about just simply diving in? Is that what you need to do today? To say, God, I want more of you. I want more of your presence. I want more of your peace in my life. I want more of your presence in my life. So Lord, I'm not going to waste paddling about. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to dive in and say, Lord, I'm all yours. He wants to give you shalom, proper peace, true shalom. It might be that you're thinking, I can't dive in, but I want to stand there and I want to just know the presence of God coming around my legs, coming around my waist. The presence of God wrapping you. Almost feels like his arms around you. And he encourages you to go that bit deeper. And he holds you. And he whispers in your ear, I love you. I've got you. I'm not going to leave you. I understand your pain. I know your crisis. I know what you're going through. Don't give up. Don't give up. I can bring life. I will bring life. I will bring my peace.